in the second panel, we will have discussion. We will not have any presentations. We will have 3 questions to which I would like to answer all the speakers. I will be choosing a random order of speaking, trying to maintain the gender balance in speaking first and second. And our topic of the second session is national minorities' rights in education, teaching in and teaching of minority languages. As we all know, educational issues for national minorities are really one of the most important, because it's the education, learning in minority language and learning minority language, which helps to preserve the culture, which helps to preserve traditions very often, and all our self-identification. So, of course, we cannot, in the conference, speaking about the best practices in minority protection, we cannot just skip the question of minorities. So I'm very happy that today we have specialists dealing with minority languages, or teaching in minority languages, teaching of minority languages. And I would like to introduce very shortly my speakers of today. First of all, I will start presenting as I have in the agenda. So first of all, I would like to introduce the representative, Dr. Sauro Civitillo. I'm sorry if I pronounce it wrong. All the names are Polish, so I'm more flexible in pronouncing them. And Sauro is from Utrecht University, from the Netherlands. And I believe we'll share his comments, for example, insights regarding ethnic minority students, and all the rest that we have to speak today. I would also like to present Monika Haber. Monika Haber is Lithuanian citizen who works in Warsaw. If somebody knows how to teach language and about teaching language, the best is Monika, who is a doctor in philology and privately my sister. So, you know, family involved everywhere. So I would also happy having here Mr. Karol Kwiatkowski, who told me that he likes the questions, but he thinks that he can tell more than I will ask him. So I'm really very interested in what he's about to speak. Yes. Mr. Karol Kwiatkowski is president of Central Council of Roma and vice president of International Romani Union, if I'm correct. So we are waiting also for your insights. And the last but not the least is my colleague, Professor Jolanta Urbanovič. And for sure, she knows a lot about education, about policies. For some time, she served as the Vice Minister of Education, so she knows all the ins and outs. And for some time, she was also advisor to our recent president on educational questions. So she knows definitely more than minority education. And I believe she told me that she also wants to speak beyond my questions. So I am expecting a very interesting discussions. So thank you all for coming, and let's start with the questions. My speakers know we have 3 questions, and I will ask each speaker to answer that particular question. Let's try to limit our speeches to 5 minutes per question, but of course, if you want to tell more, you are more than welcome. So the first question, and if you don't mind, we will start from this side. We will start with Monika, Sauro, Jolanta, and Karol, and then we will go the opposite direction. So the first question is, what is the most important objective of minority language education today? I will not continue that question. You have the long part of that question, just not to go to the answer. So what is the most important and why? Thank you.
Okay. So first of all, I would like to thank you for being here. Katarzyna is my sister, but I feel some kind of intrusive because I today represent a little bit different discipline, ethnolinguistics. So I will start from just a few brief sentences about my framework, which I will approach to my questions. So as I mentioned, I come to this discussion as a researcher working at the intersection of cognitive ethnolinguistics, anthropology, linguistics, and a little bit of memory studies. These fields share a common assumption that language is not only a communication system, it is also a career of cultural knowledge, memory, emotional experience, and the ways in which we experience and perceive and value the world. So it means that we believe as ethnolinguists, cognitive linguists, that linguistic facts show some kind of embodiment of our experience. So from this perspective, minority language also is some kind of living archive of memory and perhaps even more importantly, practices of remembering. So through prayers, through some ritual formulas, forms of address, holiday rituals, and everyday interactions, communities continuously recreate their relationship with the past, with one another, and with the world around them. This perception is also shaped by my own experience because here in Lithuania, I'm a Pole, so I'm a representative of national minority. But when I come to Poland, I become Lithuanian, someone who represents Lithuanian culture, language, and identity. So living between languages, cultures, and systems of belonging has made me particularly sensitive. The study of minority languages is also somewhat newer direction in my research. So for this reason, I would like my contribution today to be understood not as a definite statement, but rather as a reflection accompanying a broader research journey I hope I will start. So I would actually begin by questioning the assumption that objective mentioned in question can be meaningfully separated from one another. In contemporary debates on minority language education, we often encounter three dominant narratives. The first emphasizes language preservation and identity. The second focuses on educational achievements and equal opportunities. And the third highlights social inclusion and participation in broader society. All three are undoubtedly very important, but I would argue that they are somehow outcomes of something deeper. Because one of the most important objectives for me as an ethnolinguist and cognitive linguist, objective of minority language education is to ensure cultural continuity through meaningful intergenerational transmission. What do I mean by that? We are quite used to talk about minority language primarily as communication system or educational subjects. So we measure success through numbers of speakers, examination results, curriculum implementation, or institutional provision. But they tell us not enough about whether a language remains meaningful in people's life. Because a language survives not only because people know it, language survives because people continue to live through it, to perceive and perceive the world through it, because they feel need to use it while accomplish their social meaningful purposes in relation with someone and something they feel and they care about. This is particularly visible when we look beyond schools, when we go to families. Languages remain vital when they continue to function as the language of family stories, childhood memories, wisdom, religious practices. And from a perspective of cognitive ethnolinguistics, language is not simply a tool of expressing thoughts. This is why I find the concept of language as a living archive particularly useful. Minority languages preserve not only grammatical structure, but knowledge, cultural knowledge. So the question is not only whether a child learns a minority language at school, but it goes a little bit deeper, whether the language remains connected to meaningful life experiences. Can the child use it in communication with grandmother or grandfather? Can it be heard during family celebrations, religion practices? And if the answer is no, then even the most excellent educational outcomes may not be sufficient to ensure long-term vitality. At the same time, to make it clear, I strongly believe and support the role of schools, but their task should not be limited to transmitting linguistic competence. Their broader mission is to create conditions in which minority languages remain connected to memory, community, and lived experience. So its role must be sustaining the human capacity to remember, belong, and interpret the world through the language of one's cultural and linguistic community.
Thank you, Monika. So when we are speaking about school educations, we are used so much to tell schools are the ones to preserve the language. Schools are the ones to educate. And here we hear schools are okay, but let's speak ourselves also minority languages at home, because this is even more important. I couldn't agree more. And I would like to continue with the same question. Sauro, you're more than welcome.
Okay, so thank you for having me today. Well, I think it is definitely an important question and also not easy to answer, in the sense that I can think of many or several objectives that, of course, are also deeply interconnected. I bring also a psychological perspective, so I'm not a linguistic, but I mean, we have already discussed that how important it is to for children to this objective of language maintenance, right? That language is one important aspect of our identity. What I maybe would like also to stress is that minority language education has also the power to influence socialization processes. Because we know that schools, with their curricula, with their classroom practices, teaching instructions, also send some sort of very powerful institutional messages, right, to families and children. So if these schools value minority language, then these children are also more likely, for example, to speak this minority language at home. I think maybe we could also, and we know how important it is to speak the minority language at home, because we see that in these families, they usually report greater levels of family cohesion and fewer family conflicts. And maybe we can also help to debunk a myth in education, which is very widespread in academia. And so the idea that if children speak a minority language at home, they also tend to perform less well compared to their monolingual peers. This is quite widespread, but actually, we see from empirical studies that use large data sets, for example, PISA, which is this large educational evaluation, which also Lithuania is included. We see the opposite. We see that if children speak their minority language at home with their parents and siblings, grandparents, we see a positive association with key subject schools such as read and math. So again, I think this objective of fostering also socialization processing and reinforcing the idea that language is an asset is, in my view, an important objective. And of course, also maybe another goal that I may think of that goes beyond these schools that implement multilingual policies. I think that minority language education also has the goal to sort of increase awareness of the recognition of minority languages, improve the attitudes, and foster positive attitudes towards these languages and their speakers, and at the same time also to sort of reduce linguistic discrimination, as well as these assimilative pressures that may come from societies or other peers in school to assimilate linguistically.
Thank you very much. If you can turn off the microphone. Yeah. So we heard that schools is a very good tool of socialization, actually. And we will continue our panel with Jolanta. You're more than welcome. Jolanta will speak in Lithuanian, yes?
Yes, because I know that there's a possibility to speak in Lithuanian, and I think it will be easier for you to listen me in Lithuanian, and for me it will be easier to speak and to express my insights in Lithuanian. Tai aš persijungiu ir taip gerai. Ir visų pirma, man tai labai patiko tas pirminis klausimas, kuris apėmė, klausimas skambėjo, kad koks šiandien yra svarbiausias mažumų kalbų švietimo tikslas. Panašiai, bandau dabar jau persijungiau, gal per anksti reikėjo klausimą anglų kalbą, originalo kalbą paskaityti. Kalbos ir tapatybės išsaugojimas, mokymosi rezultatų gerinimas, socialinės įtraukties stiprinimas ar kas nors kita. Ir aš manau, kad čia labai taikliai apimtos visos tos sritys, kurios iš tikrųjų tarpusavėje yra labai labai susijusios. Tai yra gimtosios kalbos mokėjimas, ypač ankstyvajame amžiuje, lemia geresnius pasiekimus, nes mokymasis ta kalba, kuria kalbama namuose, kurią vaikas gerai žino, tai kitų dalykų, ypač tų sudėtingesnių mokymasis lemia geresnius pasiekimus. Ir tada atsiranda, kaip jau buvo kalbėta, ir pasitikėjimas, ir pasitikėjimas, ir stipresnis priklausimo pačiai ir švietimo įstaigai, ir valstybei jausmas. Ir čia apie pasitikėjimą aš nesiruošiau, bet aš prisiminiau mūsų tiesiog kito tyrimo rezultatus. Čia gal irgi, ką ir besiklausydama Monikos prisiminiau, kad tas priklausimo jausmas yra labai svarbus mokiniams, nes jis užtikrina, pasirodo, mes nagrinėjome irgi statistiškai PISA duomenis paskutinio tyrimo, kad tai yra vienas iš stipriausių veiksnių, kad mokinys jaustųsi saugus mokykloje. Tas priklausimo jausmas tam tikrai bendruomeniai, mokyklai ir panašiai. Bet aš norėjau labai pasinaudoti galimybę ir pristatyti mūsų preliminarius irgi tyrimo rezultatus kartu su profesorė iš Lodzės universiteto Barbara Jundo-Kališevska. Mes turime tokį akademinį tikslą ir pradėjome nagrinėti jau rinkti duomenis. Ir mūsų tyrimo objektas yra, kągi apie tautinių mažumų mokyklas kalbama žiniasklaidoje, koks naratyvas yra formuojamas ir kokį tai poveikį turi apskritai tautinių mažumų situacijai ir politikai. Tai vat, dabar norėčiau trumpai pasidalinti duomenimis, kokius mes gavome. Mes panagrinėjome pagrindinius Lietuvos portalus Delfi, LRT, 15 minučių, Lietuvos rytas. Ir tiesiog pastarųjų 5 metų ir pagrindinės temos, kurios dominuoja. Tai yra, aišku, jų yra nemažai, aš paminėsiu tiesiog tokį labiau koncentratą. Tai tema visų pirma, tai yra valstybinės kalbos mokėjimas, valstybinės kalbos stiprinimas. Tai nuo 2021 iki 2020 metų tai turbūt be nebuvo tokia kaip ir dažniausia tema, tai pradedant nuo to, kad didinamas finansavimas, ten buvo tam tikros priemonės 21 metais, vėliau irgi buvo kalbama apie tokie akcentai, kad neva tai tautinių mažumų mokyklų mokiniai rodo prastesnius egzaminų rezultatus ir buvo ir jau dabar pastaraisiais metais irgi buvo pristatomi teismo sprendimai, kad nes buvo kreipimasis į teismą ir rezultatai, kad turi būti didinamas lietuvių kalbos, lietuvių valstybinės kalbos skaičius pradinių klasių mokiniams. Kita dažna tema, kalbant apie tautinių mažumų mokyklas, tai yra pasiekimai ir kokybė. Irgi per tą laikotarpį 22 metais buvo liktai akcentas, kad pasiekimai kokybė gerėja, bet vėliau vėlgi pereita prie tokio naratyvo, kad tie pasiekimai tautinių mažumų mokyklose prastesni. Trečia tema, kuri yra kontekste, kuriame kalbama apie tautinių mažumų mokyklas, tai yra mokyklų tinklas. Turėčiau pabrėžti, kad mokyklų tinklas tai yra jautri ir skausminga tema apskritai, kalbant apie mažesnės Lietuvos mokyklas, bet turbūt tikrai nemažai įtampos, bent jau skaitant portalus, buvo siekiamybė būtent tas konfliktas tarp efektyvumo ir tų bendruomenių išlikimo, mažesnių mokyklų išlikimo. Ir dar taip apjungus galėčiau sakyti, kad dar viena tokia dominuojanti tema tai integracija. Vis daugiau kalbama apie tą sisteminę pagalbą, ne tik tai apie pamokų skaičių, kitaip tariant, tautinių mažumų vaikų integraciją į Lietuvos bendruomenę. Na tai va, tai tokios dominuojančios temos. Tai ką mes čia turime, koks rezultatas? Tai kokį mes paveikslą turime? Vadinasi, Lietuvoje dominuoja, mes aišku žiūrėjome labiau į mokyklas Lenkų tautinė mažuma, vadinasi, tai yra maža mokykla, kurios nesimokoma lietuvių kalbos, kuri nesiintegruoja, tokį mes naratyvą turime. O ką sako faktai? Nes mes ir faktus tikriname. Faktai sako, kad, pavyzdžiui, kaip pavyzdį pasakysiu, mokykla Lenkų dėstomąją kalba, viena iš gimnazijų yra tarp top 10 visos Lietuvos gimnazijų. Kitas faktas rodo, kad tikrai pasiekimai yra gerėjantis ir dėl lietuvių kalbos natūralu. Tiesiog kalbinė aplinka yra kitokia, namų kalbinė aplinka yra kitokia ir jeigu mes norime pasiekti, kad lietuvių kalbos, kaip gimtosios kalbos rezultatai bus lygiai tokie patys, kaip ir lietuviškų mokyklų tarp vaikų, kurie gyvena lietuviškoje aplinkoje, nes jeigu tai yra lietuviška mokykla, kitakalbėje aplinkoje rezultatai yra beveik tokie patys. Kitas faktas yra, kad kitų dalykų pasiekimai geri, tokie patys arba netgi geresni, jeigu aš žiūrėčiau kitų metų rezultatus. Integracija. Ką ten reikia integruoti? Mes turėjome kitus tyrimus. Turėjau tyrimus mokyklose Lenkų kalba, mokiniai beveik 95% pasiryžę studijuoti Lietuvoje ir dirbti Lietuvoje ir likti Lietuvoje. Tai matome tokį gailą, bet jaunas žmogus, kuris taip pozityviai nusiteikęs, baigęs mokyklą, kas įsivaizduojate, kaip jaunam žmogui sudėtinga tokioje aplinkoje susivokti. Tai ar aš čia gyvenu kažkuriam kitokiam pasaulyje, negu mus aprašo va čia kažkur žiniasklaidų spaudoje. Ir tada, kadangi taip buvo taikliai suformuluotas klausimas, aš dar pagilinau tą savo analizę ir pasižiūrėjau, o kasgi rašoma apie gimtosios kalbos mokymą žiniasklaidoje. Tai vėlgi daugiausia tik tai buvo rašoma apie Lenkų kalbos egzaminą. kad tai čia vat kaip ir pozityvus dalykas, kuris atsirado kaip vienas iš pirmųjų po valstybinio egzaminų reformų. Lenkų kalbos egzaminas buvo, lenkiškos mokyklos buvo pionierės, kurios pradėjo iš tikrųjų įgyvendinti valstybinių brandos egzaminų reformą. Bet šiaip jau čia iš tos kitos savo politinės patirties žinau, kad čia atsirado ne šiaip sau, bet kadangi tai yra tarptautinis bendradarbiavimas, yra tarptautiniai susitarimai, kurios mūsų valstybė privalėjo laikytis ir dabar pasirašyta deklaracija 2019 metais ir mes tiesiog tą egzaminą kaip ir turėjome ir stengiamės įgyvendinti. Ir jeigu jūs paklaustumėte, va tokia susidariusi situacija ir karščia, jeigu mes mėgstame ieškoti kaltų, ne žiniasklaida kalta, bet turbūt mūsų tas politinis naratyvas, apie ką kalba politikai, tas žiniasklaidoje atsispindi. Tai sakyčiau, aš toliau pratęsiu tą savo mintį, gal atsakydama į kitus klausimus, kokios mes pasiekmes turime ir kokią tai gali turėti grėsmę mūsų valstybės saugumui.
Ačiū, Jolanta, tikrai labai įdomi kalba. Ir tikrai, manau, mačiau ir Monika užsirašinėjo, turėsime klausimų. Bet aišku, pirma tęsinys bus. So now I move to our next speaker, Karol Kwiatkowski. I believe that I don't have to remind the question, so you are welcome. The floor is yours.
I hope so that I remember. First of all, thank you for the organization this important conference, and thank you for having me here. I will mention that I'm from the Roma community. I'm not only representing the Roma community, I am from the community, and my first language is Romani language. That's very important what you mentioned before, and English is maybe third or fourth language that I speak. That's sorry for the quality of the language, because that's not so easy to speak in the fourth language that you know. That will be much more better for me to speak in the Roma language to express myself. But that could be heavy for the translate, and then I will try to do my best in English. I will say before I start about how important the Romani language is for the Roma community, because I will mention about, I will turn to that 209 year when we meet Mr. President Buzek when he was elected the president of the EU Parliament, and we put on his hands the strategy how to support Roma communities in each of European countries. And I'm very glad that the implementation of the EU level was very high, and the interest about supporting Roma people in Europe was very, very good. I see the problem about the politics you mentioned before for the first panel, that the implementation on the European countries, not on the high level. On the high level, the politics we have very, very good for protection the language, for support the Roma communities, but the implementation of the countries, that's a different story on another topic. We can make another conference, I think. The language, I totally agree with the speakers before me. That's much more for all the communities from minority, like only words. That's how you think, that's how you show your perspective, and the difference about the community. You know, sometimes we understand the hospitality language, but we totally different understand it because the communication is different. Roma language, for example, is I think that that's a diplomatic language. We never say directly what we think about some fact. That's a diplomatic language because we communicate a different way. That's not only about not understanding what is written or what is saying, but about the communication. That's much more. I totally agree that the most important thing is to learn and teach minorities language at home. But believe me, that's not enough, because something different is the language that we speak each day in the conversation on the street, and something different is a public discussion, what we want to express, a poesy, and etc., etc. That's not enough. In the Roma situation, for example, we need Roma institution who will support the language, how to teach language, and what to teach, because that's always the conversation about the two sides. Not each minority wants to share their language for the host population, for example. I see another problem about the Roma communities, about the minority when we say about the Roma, because often we are citizens from a country, but we are treated like minorities in these countries. You know, for example, in Poland, we have many Romas that are citizens of Poland, but we are treated like the, for example, migrants or the minority, and that's the difficult to say. Of course, we have another language, we have another culture, but that's only one fact of this. I think that language is a fundament of each of cultures, and by Roma is the same story. That's very important to protect the language, because I totally agree with Professor Wichrkiewicz that some languages are very difficult to protect, because we don't have institutions like, for example, each of country have. The Ministry of Culture, the Ministry of Education, many books, many professors of, for example, who support languages. By Roma, we don't see the situation. And that's the fact that we need to change a little bit the politics in countries to support Roma institutes who will provide how to teach, who should do it for the Roma communities.
Thank you very much. Actually, in the end, you touched the topic that is probably very sensitive in general when we are speaking about teaching national minorities, because it's very often that we don't have special tools for that. And even if the universities, they do provide the specialists, it might occur that it's still not enough if you don't have materials how to teach. We also face this in Lithuania. Although I have also to mention that it's in Lithuania, when we speak about handbooks, manuals, it's not only a problem of national minorities, but in general, in schooling, we changed the program and we forgot that we also have to change the manuals. But let's move to our second question. What is currently the greatest challenge to effective minority language education in Europe? And what should policymakers prioritize in addressing it? And I think that Karol already started this, so maybe you could just continue and we will go different direction.
Yes, thank you for the question. Yes, I mentioned this before, that example, but I think that the same situation is for all minorities, that we should have our institutes, our organization who support how to teach, who should do it, make programs for doing that right, because that's very, very important thing. What we need partners for the minorities to do it. Sometimes some people come with the tool who will share with the minorities. For example, for Roma, we know what is better for you. No, we know ourselves what is better for us, and we won't decide about our nation. That's the main things. I think that right now that we provide a new discussion about in EU, we provide a new strategy about the finance in the next perspective that will be done short, I hope. And we, the Roma community, are very strong advocacy making about how to support the Roma language. It's not only language, that the culture. And we need budget for this, we need fund for this, we need tools to to do this, and we need people from the community to do. University is a good place to make a start discussion about how to done is good. Our organization, our local organization, you mentioned, and Central Roma Council, right now we are very close cooperating with one of the university in Poland, and we open two faculties about the Roma assistant, how to work at school, to give in the tools how to support the Roma children, and Romologia, because the knowledge is very important, how to support each other community. Then I feel the empathy is very important, like you mentioned before, but empathy is not the best word for me. That should be a strategy, and that should be a continuation of the politics. We often see that some government wants to do the change in the good way, but we have election and another government comes back to the start. And that's the problem, why we cannot go so quick that we want. Thank you.
In other words, like, don't follow the policy about us without us, and give the empowerment to the minorities, and the minorities know how and what to do. Thank you, Karol, and Jolanta, let's move to you.
Okay, again, I switch to Lithuanian language, and I am really agree. Tikrai sutinku, kas buvo pasakyta, kad sprendimai dėl tautinių mažumų, dėl kalbos ugdymo, dėl tautinių mažumų švietimo negali būti priimami be tų tautinių mažumų atstovų. Bet irgi jeigu grįžtant prie klausimo, jis toks platesnis truputėlį irgi buvo, ir aš apie Europos kontekstą galbūt norėtųsi čia irgi akcentuoti, kad tautinių mažumų švietimas tiek Europose, tiek pasaulio valstybėse yra tikrai labai skirtingas. Ir kartai ir skirtingas, čia irgi su kolegomis nagrinėjame, ir mūsų ir studentai nagrinėja skirtingus tautinių mažumų švietimo modelius įvairiose pasaulio šalyse. Ir išvados dažniausiai būna tokios, kad tai yra labai, nėra tinkamas, kaip čia, lyginamai analizai tai nėra tinkamas objektas. Nes tai labai skirtingi istoriniai kontekstai, geopolitiniai kontekstai. Vat kaip ir kolega sakė, irgi įvairiose šalise ir netgi skirtingos tautinės mažumos turi skirtingą savo tą egzistavimo pagrindą. Tai ir, bet sakyčiau, kad Lietuvos pavyzdys, čia, kai buvo eurokomisaras atvykęs ir kai turėjome čia pokalbį, tai jis labai gerai atkreipė dėmesį, kad jūs turite unikalią, labai gerą sistemą tautinių mažumų švietimo, saugokite ir puoselėkite. Ir aš čia irgi turbūt ir norėtųsi tą kažkaip čia toj vietoje ir pacituoti. Ir sakyčiau, dėl lenkų kalbos mokymo, iš tikrųjų, netgi ir Lietuvos kontekste turime kuo didžiuotis. Ir sakyčiau, čia vat ir Lenkų mokyklo draugija, kaip čia išvertus, Mačia Školina turi didelį vaidmenį, nes visada ir literatūra, ir programomis, ir mokymais pasirūpina, bet ir pati ta Lenkų kalbos mokytojų bendruomenė, jinai yra proaktyvi. Ir iš tikrųjų, ką aš prieš tai paminėjau apie Lenkų kalbos egzaminą, tai tikrai ne vieno dalyko mokytojai ėjo, konsultavosi, kaip jūs susitelkėt, kaip atnaujinot programą, kaip organizavote pirmąjį egzaminą. Tai, sakyčiau, turime čia tų tikrai gerųjų pavyzdžių, gerųjų praktikų, kuriomis tiesiog reikia ir didžiuotis. O dėl Lenkų kalbos mokymo ir to tokio įvaizdžio mokyklose, vis dėlto čia įžanga tokia pozityvi, bet norėčiau pasakyti, kad turime tikrai iššūkių. Ir ypač, kai čia buvo metų pradžioje sprendimas mažinti, pasiūlymas ar sprendimas išėjęs iš ministerijos didinti lietuvių kalbos pamokų skaičių, mažinti gimtosios kalbos pamokų skaičių, nes vaikam neišplėsime tų valandų skaičiaus, tiesiog higienos normos neleidžia. Tai čia sakyčiau, kad tikrai buvo nelabai gera linkme tas toks pasiūlymas ir sprendimas, nes lenkų kalba irgi turi tam tikrų iššūkių ir jeigu mes norėsim ją išstumti iš tautinių mažumų mokyklų, ją vietą užim, ką mes pastebime, turbūt ir čia esantis atstovai pasakytų, kad ne lietuvių kalba užima tą vietą, bet rusų kalba užima tą vietą. Ir čia jau truputėlį platesnis klausimas, geopolitinis klausimas, nes aš sakyčiau, kad mes tikrai turėtume rodyti pagarbą, saugoti ir stiprinti būtent lenkų kalbos Lietuvos mokyklose mokymą.
Ačiū, Jolanta. Let's continue to Sauro. So what I will repeat shortly the question: what is currently the greatest challenge to effective minority language education in Europe, and what should the policy makers prioritize?
Yes, so thank you for this question. I think the greatest challenge to effective minority language education in Europe is this persistence of negative attitudes, and what I would say, call it deficit-oriented orientations, ideologies towards minority languages. Of course, these ideologies are held by, I would say, all stakeholders in education, so including researchers in academia, including policymakers, school principals, as well as teachers. Of course, again, they do not hold these negative attitudes equally towards all languages. We know, unfortunately, that some minority languages are seen even more stigmatized than others. I mean, a good example of Romani, unfortunately. I have conducted studies in Germany and in the Netherlands, where I lived for almost 10 years, and I can see that teachers who hold these negative attitudes, deficit-oriented beliefs, they are also the ones that are more likely, for example, to punish students if they talk a different language than the dominant language in classrooms. We also see at the school level, in which you see that schools implement strict rules, again, punishing students for speaking different languages, or for bringing other characteristics of their culture. So this is certainly one aspect, and also related to that is also the lack of preparation for teachers. I have started working in Germany in 2015, which was in the middle of this refugee crisis. And I remember in the University of Potsdam, where I worked, at that time in the teaching training institution, there were no courses whatsoever on preparing teachers to deal with multilingual learners, which was quite surprising because, well, Germany has a very long history of migration. Then I think the situation has changed. I mean, there were several steps that were taken, also best practices, and we may talk about that later. But still, in Germany, for example, around only 2/3 of all teacher training institutions have indeed seminars, courses to deal with these topics. And so it means that 1/3, they do literally anything or very little to prepare teachers. And I see also with my experience every year when we discuss these topics with pre-service teachers, so students who are starting to become teachers, And during their practicum, during their teaching practicum, they often have these comments like, well, I felt uncomfortable to be in a class in which some students talk a different language than mine, because I'm afraid that they talk about me, they talk behind my shoulders. And well, we have these kind of conversations, right? So and then I ask back, well, what if they do not talk about you, but they simply do it in a way to, again, to feel close to the others, as a way to, they seek maybe for other students who share their same language repertoire or other cultural features. Because indeed, and this is also our need to also seek for people who somehow are equal to us or are similar to us. So I think this is, again, in my view, the priority should also be to sort of include much better preparation in teaching training institutions. Again, some, they do it partially, and also offer these courses more as an optional for students. And as the results, then, that who are taking these courses are teachers who are already somehow inclined or have already positive attitudes. So again, in my view, there should be somehow, be compulsory education for future teachers to really feel better equipped to deal with that.
Thank you very much. It was really very interesting, and to some extent, it was proving what Jolanta mentioned earlier, that it's sometimes difficult to compare different situations because those challenges might be different. However, that challenge, what I heard, that this lack of proper preparation of the teachers, I believe it's can be that common thing in many countries. Yes, let's continue, Monika.
So I absolutely agree with my colleagues that those challenges and education, minority language education has a lot of multi-layered problems. So we should talk about problems in different layers and levels. Of course, we can mention many challenges, as including teacher shortage or lack of supporting institutions or narratives, as Jolanta mentioned. But so I won't repeat what my colleagues said, and I will move to just to continue my reflection about those about the cultural continuity. That, in my opinion, education, as we understand it, curricula, programs, mother tongue programs, etc., should strongly go hand in hand with cultural practices, because language vitality depends not only on institutions but also on everyday practice. I don't want to be banal, but I come from marketing, so I can adopt some processes. You know, sometimes the product can be the best, the price can be the best, but if I don't need it, then there's no guarantee that someone can just convince me to buy it. So I'm very sorry that I talk about minority languages like a product, but sometimes it is. Sometimes those instruments work like that. So young people may achieve high levels of linguistic competence. They used to, social media, they gather higher education. They even with their colleagues on social media, just take a look at those groups. They are talking, for example, English, but they can use, I don't know, Polish, Lithuanian, Roma, and other languages. So research on heritage language transmission constantly shows that language maintenance depends not only on formal instructions. However, they are very, very important, because it is always, someone talked about that during second panel, that it is easier to change something, to move forward when we have a background. But we should need and feel the importance of that background. So if a language no longer functions in a spaces of affection, ritual, memory, belonging, institutional support just may not be enough to sustain it. And what should policymakers prioritize or do, as the question sounds? So first, recognize the family as domain of sovereign linguistic practice, not a site of state intervention, but a space in which families have the right and the resources to transmit their languages and cultural frameworks without pressure toward assimilation. Second, support minority language institutional spaces. So Karol talked about the lack of those institutions which teach, which show, which recommend, which supports. Here in Lithuania, sorry, as a Pole, I'm quite happy because I had good practices. We had supporting institutions like Macie Szkolna. We had a lot of instruments, we could use them, but it was a couple of years ago. So support both schools and religious communities, cultural organizations, digital platforms, and intergenerational gathering spaces, those spaces which give emotionally charged contexts to use naturally minority languages. Third, create legal frameworks that protect minority language domains from market-driven erosion. For instance, by supporting minority language media, protecting minority language religious practices from discrimination, and not only religious practices, but all practices that are meaningful in context of minority language. And fourth, fund and resource the something I call emotional practitioners of minority languages. So the grandmothers, the ritual specialists, the storytellers. Sometimes I observe some activities of young Polish people living in Lithuania, like pub quiz, etc. So I call them, young minority language and culture influencers. So this is not a glamorous policy work. It does not produce impressive institutional structures or measurable educational outcomes, but it is where the real work of cultural survival also occurs. And fundamentally, I think that we should also ask not only how do we educate speakers, but also how do we protect the conditions, the metaphorical speaking infrastructure under which minority language functions naturally. And this requires treating minority language maintenance not only as a project, as an educational or political or other project, but also as an issue of cultural rights and community sovereignty.
Thank you very much. So it reminds me what you are telling, that we have to support the minorities in their gatherings on different occasions, more and less official, because it's always easier to protect something together with others than alone. And there is a very good saying for that in Lithuanian, vienas lauke ne karys. So there is a very one in the field is not a soldier, if to translate this literally. So it's a very good observation. So, and slowly we are coming to the last question, and let's make the answers short for us also to have floor for the discussion. The question is about the future. Imagine minority language education in Europe 10 years from now. What one change would you most like to see, and what would be its impact on minority communities? And we can start with Jolanta, maybe.
Okay. Taip, tai aš gal, jeigu labai trumpai, tai aš atsispirsiu tuo savo tyrimu, kurį mes turime, ir labai norėtųsi po 10 metų atsiversti Delfi, LRT ar kitus portalus, kurie tuo metu bus populiarūs, ir matyti kuo daugiau tokių pozityvių antraščių apie bendrai švietimą, turbūt bendrai apie švietimo politiką Lietuvoje, ir kalbant kartu ir apie švietimą lenkų kalba, nes tai mano požiūrį, tiesiog tas, kad keistųsi požiūris, kad tos mokyklos ne dėl kažko tai kariauja, bet kad jos yra labai svarbi švietimo dalis, kuri kaip ir kūrė tos mūsų demokratinės valstybės, socialinės įtraukties ir atsparumą visą infrastruktūrą. Ir manyčiau, kad būtent toks požiūris suformuotų ir bendrą didesnį pasitikėjimą valstybę, mažintų polarizaciją bendrai visuomenėje. Ir ypač turint omenyje dabartinį tą šiuolaikinį geopolitinį kontekstą, nes būtent bendruomenė, kuri jaučiasi pripažįstama, kartu su savo kultūra, su savo kalba, jaučiasi saugi, yra tiesiog mažiau pažeidžiama išorinių manipulacijų, nepasitikėjimą ar kažkokių radikalizuojančių naratyvų, o iš tikrųjų mokykla tai yra tam svarbi erdvė. Ir tos apskritai visuomenės pastaruoju metu sakyčiau, kad švietimas mokykla tai yra svarbi valstybės saugumo infrastruktūros dalis.
Ačiū, Jolanta. If we can proceed to Sauro, just we will make a different order.
Well, I think 10 years from now, I would like to see educational systems across Europe maybe better reflecting the communities they serve. And so both in who is teaching our children, and second in what is acknowledged as worth in learning and assessing. And I think let me start also from the teaching profession, which was indeed also mentioned before. So in the Netherlands, for example, we have around 1/3 of our students had the so-called migration background, so they are born outside of the Netherlands, or their parents are born outside of the Netherlands. If we zoom in on the 4 major cities, we see that it's not a minority anymore, but it's about 2/3 of our students who indeed comes from who represent different cultures and ethnicities. But if we look at our teachers in these big cities, is only about 5%. Outside of these cities, so across country, is only 1%. So there is this strong gap, and this demographic gap, which of course is also, I would say, such a cultural gap between our students and our teachers. And I think I would like to see an increase of teachers who indeed also represent diverse communities, because this will also help to maybe also lower these negative attitudes we discussed earlier, and to see language as a resource and not in these deficit terms. And also for students, this will also provide an important message that the institutions where they are also belongs to them. So we also know from research that this ethnic and cultural match between our teachers and our students is also far beyond potential beneficial effects. And yeah, again, I would like to see an increase of the number of teachers who represent different communities. And second, also we see, again, back in Germany, I see that slowly, for example, afternoon minority language programs are implemented. Also the region where I have lived in West Germany, which is among the most diverse in Europe, there is a growing number of schools who have implemented this type of programs. And we see also in other cities like Berlin that in the last 10-15 years, the number of schools that have adopted bilingual curricula or other forms of multilingual policies is growing, slowly, but is growing. So I would like to see this in place, maybe a different pace, but I'm confident that we're going in the right direction.
Thank you very much. And we started with the lady, so the lady we keep for the last, Karol.
Thank you for the question. What is my wish? My wish is that we show the truth about, for example, Roma culture, Roma language, because right now our young people, the perspective are not attractive for them. You know, that's so much stereotypes about the culture. I totally agree with you that you mentioned before that culture and language is some product. It's product about our life. It's much more important like other products. But when the young people from the minorities do not understand the value of their culture, of the language, they will don't have this fundament that we have. And they very hard to get success then, to get to be very okay with yourself, because that's very important to be okay with yourself when you have these fundamentals. And my wish is to have the tools to share the perspective, the real perspective, how looks the Roma culture, because the knowledge about Roma culture, about Roma language is only stereotype language. Not only, you know, in the community generally. That's the same story about universities, that's the same story about politics, that's the same story about any of level in each of the countries. We built about the stereotypes, and we need to cut it and to go forward. We need tools to show a real perspective that the Roma language is one of the oldest languages of the world. Our culture is one of the oldest culture in Europe, like the minorities, and we must show some famous people, for example, Charlie Chaplin, and we build on this people. And right now, we show only the people from the minorities, for example, the Roma minority, only the stereotype. For what you need the Roma language? We are 20 million people in the world. We need that for many things, to build ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The last but not the least.
So I look at my notes and I come to mind that I'm a dreamer because I have a lot of points, but I will start, just try to make the long story short. And I think that one of the things I would like to change in future is the perception of minority language as it is itself. That we should not only to talk about it in defensive terms, that we have to also mention benefits, if I can call it like that. So I would like minority language fluency is recognized as marker of cultural sophistication and intellectual capacity. So I think that sometimes we don't see that value. We don't see the prestige of this language as well. So I think that during the first panel also Thomas reflected about that. So here is one of the main problems or challenges for future times. And most fundamentally, I would like minority languages would shift from being understood as problems requiring solutions to being understood as resources carrying form of human knowledge, cultural memory that are irreplaceable and irreducible to the framework of the majority culture.
Thank you very much. So now we still have a bit of time for coffee. We know that coffee time is a holy time, but the question time is also the holy time in the conference. So I would like now to ask the audience for the questions. I see Hanna, I see Agata, and I see the lady there. So let's go with such order.
Okay, thank you very much for your questions. I have a question to Jolanta, but maybe all of you can reflect, because I understand the dream or anticipation for having the minority people education in minority languages and having schools, but then how does it reflect with the fact that we see the optimization when the classes are joined, when there is not enough students in the region and have to travel into another city, losing the opportunity to study in the minority language? Do you have solution for that, practical one? Thank you.
In English, okay. Gerai, tada gal lietuviškai bus greičiau, nes vis tiek čia reikia pirmą ir mąstyti, ir atsakyti. Šiaip problema, apie kurią jūs paklausėte, yra būdinga ne tik tai tautinių mažumų mokykloms, šiaip būdinga visoms mažoms mokykloms, kurių turime tikrai daug Lietuvoje. Ir, na, vėlgi remsiuosi kitų dar tyrimų, kurį darėme Lietuvos mokyklose, mažose mokyklose, kad kuo toliau, tuo labiau matome poreikį ne tiek skaičiuoti, kiek kainuoja mokinys, kiek vertinti tai, būtent kelionės trukmę, ką jis praranda toli važiuodamas, nes ypač jau čia ir siejasi su neformaliuoju švietimu, jis negali lankyti būrelių toj pačioj mokykloje, papildomo kokio ugdymo, nes tiesiog tas autobusas tada namo jį parveš jau beveik naktį. Tai yra problema ir kadangi savivaldybės turi čia pas mus kažkiek savarankiškumo, tai tos, kurios gali, priima tokius sprendimus, kad palieka mažesnės mokyklas, bet ko finansuoja, papildomai finansuoja. Kalbant apie tautinių mažumų mokyklas, dar vienas yra kontekstas, kad dažnai tose vietovėse šalia yra mokykla, pavyzdžiui, lenkų dėstoma kalba ir lietuvų dėstoma kalba. Tada irgi, na, kuo toliau, tuo labiau ateina toks kaip ir paskatinimas bendradarbiauti, jungiant, ypač vidurinio ugdymo pakopoje, kartu organizuojant vidurinio ugdymo programas ir tada vietoje mokiniai gali likti vietoje ir kartu, ir čia daug naudos ir kalbinių požiūrių, nes čia jau vidurinio ugdymo pakopo, tai jau ir tiek ir valstybinė kalbos lygis yra pakankamai aukštas ir tada galima jau kai kuriuos daugiau dalykų mokytis ir lietuvių kalba. Tai jeigu atsakiau.
Okay, so then I see there are no more comments here, so please continue with the question. Yeah.
Thank you very much for a very interesting panel. You said at the beginning, Monika said at the beginning something from the personal note, and I really thank you for that, because I can add that during this panel I realized that I can be also the example of minority communities, which was very interesting for me, and by the first time in my life I thought about this. But moving to the professional part, as the conference is about the best practices, I would like ask Monika and Karol Kwiatkowski about this issue of how we can marketize the Roma culture, because I think it's a very important problem for all of the Central Europe. There is a big community in each country, for example, also in Hungary. So maybe you could elaborate a lot of bits this dream, as you beautifully said. And I was thinking about the Papusza film, for example, made in Poland by the Joanna Kos-Krause. It was in your opinion, it was a good impact. Should we continue to make film like that? Because also you mentioned Charlie Chaplin. So yeah, I would like to ask about this best practices and how to marketize the Roma culture. Thank you in advance.
Thank you for that question. I would like also to add some information that I work in European Network Remembrance and Solidarity. So it is an international institution which fosters or tries to foster dialogue on difficult aspects of history of 20th century, but also on discrimination as well. And we have we have a few ways we try to just make more awareness, for example, on Roma people. We try to and organize some public awareness campaigns. We co-work with some societies and we work on materials which are, I beg your pardon for that word, which are attractive. Attractive just to keep attention, to catch attention, and then to go deeper to that topic. So we talk with representatives of that minority. We organize discussions with them on topics that might be interesting for public audience. And of course, art is always a topic that is interesting. So art, films, literature, and people will try to move to individual stories so that we can move from individual stories to a broader problems or challenges. So public awareness campaigns, I think that is a very good tool when it is embedded and entrenched also strategically. So it is the first thing that comes to my mind, but I think that we should just raise awareness. And the best way is to educate in very broad sense of that word, on different levels, just to do everything you can do on our own. Of course, I don't mention political level because for me it is obvious.
Thank you for the question. Like always in Roma case, that's more complicated in each other's. And that's not our fault, ladies and gentlemen. That's the situation more complicated about history, about the stereotype I mentioned, and about the education, that the knowledge in the host communities are very slow. What can I say? If movie is a good tool, of course, when the movie is good and show the real perspective about culture, it's okay. But when not, the stereotype is growing because we don't know what's a fact and what's only a fiction. And always the films, like you mentioned, Papusha, for example, or Infamia that was promoted by Netflix, in my opinion, they know the true story about the Romas, for example, in Papusha. And you, like, see the movies, you don't know what's a fact and what's a fiction. That's not, you know, a biography about Papusha. It's only a fabular movie, but about our nation, the Roma nation, that will be taken like a fact. And that's a risk about it. But of course, culture is very important, promotion of culture. And one of good example that I will share with you is Miss Mirga Małgorzata Tas, that she was representing Poland on Biennale 2 years before, if I correctly remember that, and she was three, and she was presenting a true Roma culture, seeing and destroying the stereotype about Roma women. She shows Roma women like active persons, like a person of success. And that's the culture with big K, and that's very important for us. When you mention about education, I think that the most important project that we have, for example, in Poland, it's the assistant of Roma education, supports Roma at the school and each of the levels. And that's not only in Poland, that's in Slovenia, in I feel Hungary, in many countries. But we need a good Roma assistant who know Roma culture, who know Roma language, and then I think that is a good way to employ the Roma assistant at the schools. I know that in Latvia we don't have this kind of people at the schools, and I think that this kind of people should be at the schools. Always culture is a good promotion, but we don't see that in public.
I will just one sentence because Karol inspired me with that. Very important while working on those initiatives and education is that we cannot do this. I mean all who are not representatives of a Roman minority without Roman people, because it's also one of, I don't know, incorrectness that we try to solve their problems, but we cannot do that without them.
Only one thing. You see, like host populists, the problems that we Roma have, but you don't have the perspective why we have this problem. And we must turn to the history. And that not only the problems of center of Europe, but the problem of each of European countries.
Yes, and we know that in some southern countries that politics against Roma people is a main point of the campaigns. Yes, and the last but not the least, and all the other discussions we will continue during the break.
Ačiū. Puiku. Labą dieną. Kalbėsiu lietuviškai, nes ir mano klausimas bus labiausiai Jolantai skirtas. Esu Emilija Karčevska, esu Lietuvos Lenkė ir kartu dirbu Užsienio reikalų ministerijoje. Ir labai ačiū šitą švietimo temų pristatymą šioje konferencijoje, jos dėl to, kad yra tos politinės darbotvarkės dalimi, ką jūs ir paminėjote, jos labai aktualios ir mums dirbantiems toje srityje. Ir atrodo kartais, kad kai mes kalbame apie švietimo politiką, tai kalbame apie pusės. Turi tų neigiamų tokių patirčių viena vertus, kartu tų atminties apie tas neigiamas patirtis ir kalba iš tokios gynybinės pozicijos, gynybinėse apkasuose. Ir mes tada jau savo darbe esame tie tarpininkai, kurie turi susikalbėti vieni su kitais. Tai čia aš turiu tokį ir vieną tokį patikslinimą iš to, ką pasakė Jolanta. Labai įdomus buvo pristatymas jūsų kartu su Barbara Jundo Kališevska atliktas tas tyrimas. Ir kartu apie tai, kad iš tikrųjų lenkų kalbos ir mes matome, kai kalbame valstybiškai, kad mums lenkų kalbos reikia daugiau, ne mažiau. Ir labai džiaugiamės tą patirtim, kai kurios lietuviškos mokyklos, tiek Vilniaus mieste, tiek mano Šalčininkuose, iš kur esu kilusi, išstumia rusų kalbą kaip antrą užsienio kalbą ir moko lenkų kalbos kaip antros užsienio kalbos. Ir jeigu tik yra įmanoma ir yra tų lenkų kalbos mokytojų surasti, kaip yra tai svarbu, nes tai stiprina iš tikrųjų tą ir stereotipų mažinimą, ir lenkų kalbos pažinimą, ir jie pakelia į visai kitą lygį. Kita vertus ir dėl tų lenkų kalbos pamokų mažinimo. Tai tas teismo sprendimas, jis buvo apie kalbos pamokų skaičių suvienodinimą. Ir irgi čia kolegos, mūsų diplomatai jau Varšuvoje darė tyrimą, kad tas 5 lietuviškos mokyklos, kurios egzistuoja Lenkijoje, jos irgi turi tą suvienodinimą. Aišku, čia jau visiškai kitas klausimas, kaip vykdomos tos reformos ir apie tą būtent dialogo ir santykio mezgimą. Ir mano gal klausimas jums, čia gal ir patirtis kitų prelegentų galėtų padėti, koks jūsų būtų praktinis patarimas, nes mes kalbame, kad tie stereotipai, jie yra svarbus ir skaudus. Tai kaip gal būtų kokia praktinė mintis, kaip mažinti tos stereotipus apie tautinės mažumas. Ačiū.
Labai ačiū už jūsų refleksiją ir už jūsų tą asmeninę patirtį. Nežinau, ar čia būtų, žinote, tokį kaip kažkokią priemonę, kuri viską išspręstų, tai turbūt sudėtinga pasakyti, bet turbūt tas siekinys, nesupriešinti kalbų visų pirma. Ir viena ir kita kalba mūsų tapatybei, tautinės mažumos tapatybei yra tikrai labai svarbi. Ir tarkim, kadangi objektas buvo gimtoji kalba, tai aš nekalbėjau apie lietuvių kalbos mokymą, bet tikrai, kad jau čia kalbu ir kaip tyrėja, kaip praktikė, bet ir kaip mama, kurios vaikai mokėsi ir mokosi mokykloje lenkų kalba, tikrai esu suinteresuota, kad ypač pradinėse klasėse lietuvių kalba lietuvių kalbos tikrai būtų išmokstama, bet aš tikrai puikiai suprantu, kadangi irgi žiūrėjome problematiką lietuvių kalbos mokėjimo tautinių mažumų mokyklose, nagrinėjome truputį valstybinius brandos egzaminus rezultatus. matome, kad klaidos yra skirtingos. Ta prasme, ten, kur praranda tautinių mažumų mokiniai, tai yra ne tos pačios klaidos, ne tie patys praradimai, kuriuos patiria lietuviškų mokyklų mokiniai. Vadinasi, jų ta kalbinė aplinka, kurioje jie auga, reikalauja truputėlį kitokios prieigos prie lietuvių kalbos mokymo. Jiem reikia daugiau gramatikos. Ir, pavyzdžiui, pradinėse klasėse, nes dabar mes turime visiškai vienodą programą. Nuo pat 1 klasės iki 12. Tai yra sėkmė mokykloje, jeigu mokykla turi stiprų lituanistą, kuris geba pritaikyti, adaptuoti tas programas prie to kalbinio konteksto, iš kurio ateina ar kuriame gyvena tas mokinys, kuris ateina į 1 klasę prieš mokyklinę grupę, beveik visiškai nekalbantis, pavyzdžiui, lietuvių kalba, nes tiesiog jo kalbinė aplinka, namų, draugų yra kitokia. Tai norėtųsi pastiprinti lietuvių kalbos mokymą, ta prasme peržiūrėti programas, kad jos tikrai tiktų realiems mokinių tautinės mažumos poreikiams. Irgi tos priemonės, apie kurias buvo kalbėta, jos yra labai svarbios, jos irgi turi būti pritaikytos. Arba kaip pavyzdys, pavyzdžiui, dabar mano mažiausias sūnus bus 5 ir mes gauname sąrašą literatūros ir aš irgi atkreipiau dėmesio, kad, tarkim, jeigu tai yra versta literatūra, pozicijos kartojasi. Kai kurios, jūs aišku, pasakysite, tai viskas gerai, tai kokia problema, gali skaityti arba lenkų kalba, arba skaityti lietuvių kalba. Bet jeigu sudarant ugdymo programas, apie ką aš iš tikrųjų čia aš turiu irgi taip savo kaltę, taip turbūt kažkiek pripažinti, nes kaip tik tada dirbau ministerijoje, kai pradėjome atnaujinti programas ir daug kalbėjome su tomis, tada formavosi grupės, kurios turėjo atnaujinti programas ir tikrai, bet kaip tik buvo pati kadencijos jau pabaiga ir kaip čia pasakius, formaliai negalima buvo kažkaip dar kažko padaryti, kad kartu dirbtų lituanistai ir lenkų kalbos mokytojai ir žiūrėtų ir sąrašą, ir programas kartu kurtų, kad galbūt ten, kur kartojasi, pavyzdžiui, autoriai, galima buvo praturtinti, tarkim, lietuvių kalbos programą, daugiau galbūt kalbos kultūros, tų temų duoti tiems tautinių mažumų mokiniams. Bet šitoj vietoj tas stiprinimas, draugystės, didesnės draugystės mokant gimtąją ir valstybinę kalbą, nors dažnai tiem vaikam, net, aš žinokit, man ta valstybinė kalba labai neskamba. Dažniausiai tai yra 2 gimtosios kalbos, arba viena yra labiau namų kalba, kita yra kažkaip aplankos kalba. Tai šita draugystė tarp tų kalbų turbūt tą visą ir kontekstą ir naratyvą pakeistų.
Aš dar irgi gal vieną sakinį apie kovą su stereotipais. Su stereotipais nelabai pakovosi, nes jie tuo ir yra stereotipai, kad jie taip įsišaknyja, kad jų kaip medžio su šaknim neišrausi. Bet ką paminėjo Jolanta, kas yra labai svarbu, tų kalbų nesupriešinti. Jų nesupriešinti. Ir aš nenoriu daryti tokios savireklamos, bet aš baigiau 2 filologiją. 1 metus buvo tokia įmanoma lietuvių ir lenkų, nes negalėjau apsispręsti, kuri kalba man artimesnė. Ir gyvendama Lietuvoje aš neįsivaizduoju savo gyvenimą be lietuvių kalbos žinių. O kai išvykau į Lenkiją, tai ten ta lietuvių kalba buvo didžiulis privalumas, tiesiog didžiulis. Jau nekalbu, kad čia aš esu tautinės mažumos atstovė, o ten aš kažkaip irgi esu tos tautinės mažumos atstovė, nes ten aš jau įsitraukiu į lietuvių bendruomenės veiklą. Ir tikrai jaučiuosi čia lenkaitė iš Lietuvos, ten lietuvaitė ten Lenkijos lietuvaitė, ar kaip pavadinsi. Tai bet kas yra svarbu, tą draugystę ir viską irgi iškomunikuoti. Aš vėl į tą rinkodarą atsiprašau, bet jeigu yra tie blogi naratyvai, su jais irgi nelabai pakovosi. Bet jeigu yra komunikuojama negatyviai, tai gal pabandom ir pozityviai. Tų pavyzdžių yra labai daug, bet jie nėra matomi.
Although it's a very big pleasure to listen to all the speakers, and I believe that we can continue the discussion during the coffee break that let's make a bit shorter.